Hello, listeners. Welcome to Marie Lives the Horror. This is episode 32 of the series of True Paranormal Ghost Stories. In tonight's episode, we hear of strange experiences shared by a family residing in an ancient farmhouse. A couple of cousins have a peculiar encounter with a ghostly, crying child. And a dark force attaches itself to a couple of brothers and manipulates their nightmares. Tonight's stories are presented in collaboration with Lone Wolf YouTube channel. A link to the collab video we did on his channel will be down in the description. Be sure to show your support to this up-and-coming narrator, or you might get hunted when the moon is full. So without further ado, step into my horror chamber as we live the horror together. It all started when my aunt bought an ancient farmhouse in France's countryside. It's oddly well preserved and it's isolated, so it kind of became the family gathering spot. At first, we didn't notice anything, probably because we weren't paying much attention. The only thing we saw is how strange their dog was acting. It is a small dog, a Shih Tzu for those who want to know, which usually didn't make any sound. It only barked when he was excited, and that was pretty much it. But when they moved in, we noticed that he was acting differently. He would bark and growl at nothing randomly, and we would just laugh it off and think it was because he wasn't familiar with the place. That he would stop doing it after some time, but he didn't. The first thing that alerted us was an awful stench that we would sometimes smell for a few seconds. We are talking about a dead body kind of stench, like badly rotted meat. We would smell it at random occasions anywhere around the house, and it would usually stay for 3 to 4 seconds, I would say. We got the house checked to see if it was rodents, but nothing of that sort was found. A lot of strange things would also happen to other members of the family. We only shared these stories recently after a certain event that I am going to talk about later. One of the most recurring was seeing movement in your peripheral vision. From time to time, a lot of us would see things in the corner of our eyes while they were alone. One thing we noticed is that most of the time it was in the lower corner, like the thing was about as tall as a child, or some other times like it was something being dragged on the floor. A lot of us would also have very sudden goosebumps. I remember getting up at night because I needed to go to the toilet, and while I was doing what people do there, I started feeling very uncomfortable for no reason, and all my body hair went nuts. So I quickly went back to the bedroom I was sleeping in and tried to forget about it. A lot of family members had the same experience in different rooms. Sometimes the stench would also be there. A lot of weird noises would also be heard. One of my cousins remembers hearing the sound of his sheets being slowly dragged at night, with him not moving a muscle, hearing steps on the upper floors while nobody was supposed to be there, etc. The most terrifying of these sounds is when we would hear someone calling our voice. It would usually be a relative's voice, and it would sound like it was calling for help. I read on this sub, if I remember well, to never respond to these voices. So I would just shrug it off and tell myself that if it was really a relative, they would repeat it louder. But I don't know about others. As I said earlier, the scariest thing is that we only shared this really late, with my cousins who were already aware of those things, but it just couldn't help. We wouldn't be taken seriously. But a week ago, while my mother and one of my uncles were preparing dinner, they heard the voices of three of my youngest relatives, 5 to 8 years old, laughing and calling them in the cellar. So they started telling them to get out of it because it's dangerous. It's pitch black as there is no light bulb or anything to light the place, and the stair steps are extremely small. Of course, all three of them were with us. When we said that they were here, my mother and my uncle tried to change the topic, but one of us took the opportunity to address all of those events, and that's when everyone talked about what they witnessed. My aunt, who owns this house, got really creeped out, and now that she knows it's not her imagination, she is searching to move out as soon as possible. Do you guys have any idea of what is haunting this house? The whole stench ordeal makes me wonder if it is not some dangerous entity. P.S. I know the family gathering is not very COVID friendly, but we are getting through a tough time, and we couldn't reason my borderline redneck family to stay isolated.
My brother and I went out to smoke some cigarettes since we have strict rules in our house and we couldn't smoke inside. We went to a 24-hour convenience store not too far from my house. After we were done smoking, we headed back home, but we needed to take another route because it was past the night hour and some routes were closed due to this coronavirus. We took a different route home than usual, and we needed to go through a local cemetery. After passing the cemetery, I smelled some kind of floral scent. It wasn't strong, but I could clearly smell it. We arrived at home, and it was already past midnight. I went to sleep right after, and I had a strange dream. In my dream, I was in an unknown room. It was dark, but not too dark, so I was able to see things. Suddenly, I heard a girl laughing. I could barely hear it at first, but then the laughter grew louder and louder. I turned, and I saw a female figure standing 4 meters away from me, facing me. I couldn't see her face because it was covered by her long and messy black hair, and she was wearing some kind of long white dress. I couldn't do anything. I was just standing there frozen, and I couldn't even talk. I was so scared because I couldn't even run away from her. I woke up sweating heavily, and I headed to my brother's room to tell him about the dream I just had. But before I could tell him, he started to tell me about a strange dream he had last night. His dream wasn't exactly the same as mine, but he also saw a woman in his dream. I was surprised when he started describing the woman to me. It was the exact same woman in my dream, long messy hair covering her face and wearing some kind of long white dress. I went to the bathroom after that, but I suddenly felt uneasy when I was passing through my brother's room. I felt like there was something in the corner between my room and my brother's room. I looked at the corner, but there was nothing there. After going to the bathroom, I realized something. Maybe, just maybe, last night when my brother and I were passing through the cemetery, something followed us home. It was the woman in our dream. I was stunned. I came back to my brother's room, but this time I couldn't feel anything strange, and the thing in the corner wasn't there anymore. I didn't feel anything. Maybe it went away somehow. Here in my country, there's a myth that says that if we smell floral scents around us, especially jasmine, it possibly means there's something around us. A woman-like figure with long hair and wearing a long white dress. It could be said that that was it that followed us that night.
When I was in the Marines, I took leave and visited family. It was in July and hot, and I was at my sister's house with my kid brother. He was around 14, I think, and we were playing video games in the living room when we both heard a baby crying. My sister had just had a daughter who was a couple of months old. My sister had run to the store a little while earlier. I was like, great. She left her baby here and didn't tell us. And I was kind of irritated, because what does a 20-year-old guy and a 14-year-old guy know about taking care of a baby? So we go into my sister's room, and the crib was empty. We looked at each other like, what the fuck? When we heard the baby crying again. But this time, it was coming from the kitchen, which is where the door to the basement was. So we go in there and heard it again from the basement now. So I'm 20 and in the Marines, so it was all, I'm not afraid, even though I was terrified and decided to go downstairs and check it out. It was like 1 in the afternoon, or I would have never done that. Seriously. So my brother stays at the top of the steps, and I started heading down because we can hear a baby crying. And when I got to the bottom step, it stopped. The basement had those little windows, so there was light coming in and there was nothing there. It was the craziest shit ever, and I would have thought I was hearing things, except my brother heard it too. Just thought I would share.
My husband and I just had our 9th anniversary yesterday. Everyone who knows us knows that we met in a thrift store in the Midwest, but not a lot of people know about the other stories from that place. The store was creepy from the start. It just always felt off in there, and no one wanted to stay long after the lights went out. My husband and I would hang out behind the building often, which was a big open field with a raised plateau to the east. We'd find Indian bead fossils in the old limestone rocks that cluttered the area, and enjoyed going outside on our breaks. You definitely didn't want to be in the store when you didn't have to be. To start, every morning there would be strange sounds. This included banging on the side door, hangers shifting on the racks, bags rustling, and the creaking of shopping carts. Our manager, a devout apostolic Christian woman, would get there before everyone else. Surprising to us, due to her religious beliefs, she admitted to experiencing the same things that we had. Although for her, it was worse due to getting there before everyone else. "They're out there," she said. "That's why I always stay in the back until the other employees get here. So many times I've heard someone knocking at that door, and there's never anyone there when I open it." Another weird aspect was this strange clanking sound that would happen every night. It sounded like it was up on the roof or in the rafters. After the lights went out and our employees headed to the back, it would start. At one point, I invited my medium friend over to cleanse the property. The clanking noise went away for a few weeks, and then returned slowly, getting louder and louder. Some other strange experiences were a strange cigar smell that came and went, a sound of a woman humming when no one was around, and a music box that went off fully wound once, right after the lights were turned off. Once on my day off, I had my strangest encounter. I was walking down an aisle and saw a regular customer at the other end. I was in an Alice in Wonderland dress because that was part of my aesthetic at that age. Right in the middle of my conversation with this regular, a teacup flew off the shelf and landed a couple feet in front of my Mary Jane shoes. I estimate that it traveled 3 feet to the right and 3 feet back towards me. It was definitely not a situation of just falling off of the shelf. The regular just stared with his eyes wide while I went to get a broom. Nothing strange has ever surprised me at that store. The weirdest encounter of all belongs to my husband. Right after he turned the lights out and was heading to the back, he noticed an elderly man standing behind the center clothing rack. These racks are about 5 feet tall, so he can only see his bald head and glasses peering over. He got a bit angry at this point, telling the man that they were closed and he needed to leave. As he came around the rack, though, no one was there. The man had vanished, because he was never really there at all. Throughout the year I worked there were too many strange experiences to write them all. There was definitely something going on at that location, some sort of energy either attached to the land or to the items themselves. I visit whenever I go back to my hometown, but it officially closed this year due to strain from the COVID pandemic. I do wonder what will go in its place, though, and if the new employees will experience the same things. If you have any similar experiences, or have had any paranormal experiences in a thrift store, please let me know. This world is a strange place at times, and having others who have been through similar things helps me feel less alone.
I'm pretty sure my apartment is haunted, or at least has some lingering dark residue. I moved into my current apartment about 4 years ago. I moved in with my cousin, who I will mention is an out and proud atheist and all-around skeptic of the paranormal. Things didn't start off scary or weird at first. In fact, the atmosphere of the place felt rather nice for a new place. The building itself is quite old, from the 60s or 70s, I believe. Usually, I feel nervous or rather anxious with spending my first night in a new place, but I seem to have taken a liking to this place right off the bat. I have anxiety, and I tend to worry and fixate on things a lot. I didn't start to feel off until about a year or so, in 2018, I think. However, I found myself unable to sleep in full darkness. Like, at all. I would absolutely need to have some kind of light on, be it the television, a nightlight, a desk lamp, etc., in order to fall asleep. It was so bad that once I woke up in complete darkness, I became nervous and had a hard time breathing. I chalked it up to nyctophobia, or fear of the dark, that is quite common. Aside from that, life in the new apartment was more or less as you would expect, boring and uneventful. Flash forward a few months into the winter of 2018. I want to say either November or December. I remember getting these weird visions in my head, like someone projecting a graphic scene from a movie directly into my mind. I don't have any other way of explaining it. I have a somewhat dark sense of humor, but the types of scenes that were being projected into my mind were beyond anything that I would normally think of and or joke about. They were creepy and disturbing. One such scene depicted a woman with red hair slowly oscillating as she hanged by her neck from the ceiling. I remember her bloodshot eyes staring daggers into me. I was in the living room setting up the Christmas tree when I had this vision and noped back into my bedroom, locked the door, and stayed in until my cousin got home from work. Now enter my cousin. I had explained everything that I had seen, because really nothing actually happened. It just felt like it had. And as you'd expect, he didn't believe me. My cousin and I are very different, but are also very similar. We both don't drink, smoke, or do any sort of recreational drugs. We're basically straight edge. While I do suffer from a few medical issues, I've never experienced any sort of psychiatric issues or seen any hallucinations, And I stated earlier I wasn't really into these sort of creepy and macabre things, so I don't know where these visions were coming from. I explained seeing the hanged woman to my cousin, and he assumed that I had mistaken hanging garland/Christmas lights as the cause. Right, because anyone would see lights and or Christmas decor and automatically think, shade of hanged dead woman. There would be other strange and creepy visions randomly popping up into my mind. One such vision was a figure in what looked like an all-black morph suit, sitting crouched right by my legs as I was resting my eyes at my computer desk, which almost caused me to fall back out of my chair. Another more horrifying encounter was when I was in bed asleep. I woke up to see an ordinary man kneeling at my bedside, all the while staring hard at me. I woke up for real, hearing my own voice yelling/screaming, which I promptly stifled when I realized it was a nightmare, and no one was there. I've heard of sleep paralysis and old hag syndrome, but I don't think that's what this or any of these encounters were. For one, I could move and even speak, and I was wide awake and moving around for the others. Now for the latest, and possibly most unnerving of my experiences. They happened in tandem with the nightmares and occasional day visions. Many times while at home and alone, at night, my cousin doesn't usually get home until around 6 or 7 p.m. I would have my bedroom door opened a crack as I worked on my computer. Every time without fail, I would spot someone walking by in the corner of my eye into the direction of my cousin's room. What makes this experience far more creepy than the rest is the fact that, one, I can usually audibly hear what sounds like the front door open and close in the distance, though we live in an apartment, so it could have been the neighbors. 2, the form or shadow that I see walking by my door, almost always in complete darkness, would walk with the same gait and weight shift as my cousin. And 3, I would audibly hear someone or something sitting in my cousin's office chair, as the weight causes the padding of the chair to compress and lose air. That sound it makes when weight is applied to the seat. More often than not, that shadow or form or whatever would accurately mimic my cousin's nightly routine, which would make me believe he had just come home, forcing me to come out of my room to greet him and ask about his day, only to be met with silence. His bedroom completely still and pitch black, and definitely no one sitting in his office chair. I would always lock myself in my room whenever these events happened. For a time, we've had some really awful neighbors living below us. They were your typical loud and inconsiderate types who were always yelling and or screaming at one another and slamming doors. My cousin and I hated them, as they would ruin any quiet time we had to ourselves with more door slamming and what sounded like random pounding or hammering on the walls. When they finally left, it was in July. I remember this because my cousin and I sat and watched as they packed the last of their stuff into a U-Haul and drove out of the complex for the last time. Cue later that night, and I'm hearing what sounds like hammering, muffled noises like someone is trying to suppress a voice or to quietly talk, and even creepier, what sounded like hands or sandpaper moving around the edges of the wall and ceiling where my bed is. I knew it was not the painters or the building maintenance, as the latest they would stay to work would be about 6 p.m., and the earliest I can recall was 10 a.m. I know this because I have been woken up by a power drill / electric sander many weekend mornings as the property management worked to fix things. Curious about the sounds I had been hearing at night, when I had known for an absolute fact that everyone from the apartment below had packed the last of their stuff and moved for good. I actually approached my building's manager and inquired if the property management was having work done at night, fully knowing the answer was a resounding no, and he replied to me as expected, but with a quizzical or confused expression. I suggested perhaps a squirrel or a raccoon had somehow gotten in the apartment, despite the fact that we don't even get either of those critters in these parts, to which he said he would check it out. Another thing I wanted to add on the topic of strange noises is that I would also often hear what sounded like footsteps coming from above me. I would give myself a "dude, really?" look in the mirror before realizing that we live on the 3rd floor and that above us is the roof. One of my closets contained a small cutaway to an attic / crawl space area that I've never dared to look at as it gives me the creeps, and I always have this sensation of impending dread, like someone would burst out of there any second. I always keep the closet door shut and made sure to keep an assortment of boxes tucked directly underneath and up to the crawl space slat, just in case. I doubt anything will happen, but I am a very paranoid person. I have a few theories as to what I have been experiencing, even though they are on and off or occasional happenings. I think they might be tied to the fall and or winter time. I can't really recall experiencing these things during the summer, and of course it's possible that I did, and my mind is just mixing it with the winter stuff. So maybe someone committed suicide around winter, and their shade or spirit has been lingering dormant, only to come about around the holidays to make itself known. I've only ever seen the hanged, red-haired woman that one time, in a vision from my peripheral, and the ordinary man, in a dream, one time as well, so I don't know if they're connected. I have heard that spirits and or negative energy can channel itself into your subconscious, which can then manifest itself in dreams and even in disturbing daydreams / thoughts. Lastly, there is absolutely no way that I could have mistook the sound of someone sitting on my cousin's office chair, as it makes a distinctive whoosh noise as it is sat upon. Aside from the above mentioned, nothing much of note has happened to me here, either by the energy of the apartment or as a consequence of. There's been no poltergeist type of activity. Lights switching off and on, objects moving / being thrown. Aside from the creepy sounds of muffled hands rubbing up and down the wall by my bed, and footsteps on the ceiling / roof, and of course, the silhouette of my cousin from my peripheral. I don't know what to make of everything I've experienced thus far. I'm not religious, not an atheist, just not religious, but I do believe in the paranormal to an extent. The nightmare I can write off as just that, the creepy visions of the hanged woman, and the morph suit thing could just be my mind playing tricks on me. But how do I explain the shadow / silhouette of my cousin walking into his room, and the audible sound of his weight sinking into the office chair? Even if I could mishear something, from what would I have mistaken it? I know about shadow people, But was what I think I saw really even a shadow person? Or was it more light/darkness pareidolia? If something really is inside my apartment, what the hell is it and what does it want? Could I just be seeing things, misinterpreting things? Can all of the sounds be explained? Things are peaceful, but I just thought I'd share my experience anyhow. It is getting to be that time of year. Sorry for the novel. I just wanted to fully articulate into words what I experienced, and sometimes it reads better in your head than it does on paper. TLDR. Around wintertime, I hear unusual sounds and see shadows. Hello, listeners. Thank you for listening to tonight's episode of True Paranormal Ghost Stories as you live the horror with me. I would like to extend a very special thanks to tonight's guest, Lone Wolf, for joining me on this episode. Be sure to stop by his channel and check out our collab video. If you have a true ghost story that you would like for me to narrate in a future episode, please send your story over to my email. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell to keep up with future content. Thanks again for listening, and as always, I am your host, Marie Lives the Horror.